Good evening, everyone. Erev Tov. The parsha, it says, Lo tignovu, lo seshakru, lo sechacheshu ish ba'amiso. That in relationships with other human beings, people have to be honest. So seshakru means to tell a falsehood. And sechacheshu means to deny what you owe. There is we're all aware that there is a prohibition against actual stealing, taking possession of something which is not yours. But there's a more subtle thing that exists in this week's parsha. The Torah says, "Lo sonu isha sachiv, v'yareisam elahecha, ani Hashem." There's something called onoah. Onoah is not stealing, because onoah usually happens in monetary matters with the consent of both parties. Nevertheless, it's an abuse of trust. It's taking advantage. So, for instance, if you have you're an art collector. You're an expert in art. And a friend of yours wants to sell you a certain object of art, a painting, let's say. And he's unaware of the true value of the painting. It's on the bottom. It says Rembrandt. He thinks it's Yankel Rembrandt. So he says, "I'll sell it to you for $2,500, 10,000 shekel." And you say yes. And you're an expert, and you know it's worth millions. And you purchase it from him, and he signs the bill of sale, and he gets the money. And then he comes home, and his wife tells him, "What did you do here? That was worth millions, and you sold it for a paltry amount of money. Cancel the deal, get our money back." So that's called onoah. The Gemara says, Warren Matzia discusses it at length. Onoah basically is taking advantage of someone. You know the true value. The seller does not know the true value. You don't pay him the true value. You pay him what he asked. He only asked for 10,000 shekel. You gave it to him. So it's not gzela. It's not the shakru. You didn't say anything. You didn't deny any value. Nevertheless, the Torah says it's wrong. And therefore, the arrangement, the sale, can be canceled. The Gemara says the measure of onoah is a sixth of the value. In other words, if the overcharge is greater than 16 2/3%, so then the buyer can get the money back. And if the seller underpaid more than 16 2/3%, was paid less, so he can cancel the sale and get the item back. Now, the Gemara understands the nature of selling and buying. In our time, selling and buying is more theoretical because we deal with things that many times are not real. Bitcoins or whatever, we're selling things that are, we say they have a value, but there's no way that they really do have a value. But in the Gemara times, that was not common. And therefore, we're talking about real sales. So in effect, the Torah came to prevent price gouging. You can't charge and profit more than 16 2/3%. So and you can't take advantage, underpay. There's a floor on the bottom and a floor on the top, the ceiling on the top. Now, throughout the ages, there naturally are circumstances because prices depend on supply and demand. So how do you determine what the price is? Where do you begin to measure where the 1/6 begins? So the Gemara always presupposes that there is a fair market value. There's a market price. There was a big sale of a company in the United States this week. So when he began to buy the company, the stock was $34, $35. He ended up paying $54. But that's set by supply and demand. It's not set by actual value. So it became a very difficult thing to measure. But nevertheless, if you own a store, for instance, and let's say you buy a loaf of bread for 5 shekel. Figure in your overhead. Let's say it's another 2 shekel. So it's 7 shekel what it costs you. You can make 16 2/3% over 7 shekel, but you can't charge 100 shekel for a loaf of bread. What if it is, God forbid, a time of hunger, time of scarcity? So then can you charge, let's say, 100 shekel? So all of this is discussed in halacha regarding the question of onoah. One thing the Gemara says clearly, ein onoah bekarkoos. When it comes to real estate, there is no din of onoah. The reason for that, the Gemara explains simple. Because this is the only spot on earth that's on this spot on earth. So therefore, it's not really comparable. So if I remember the case that I was involved in, I became a rabbi in Miami Beach. So the shul had a lease on a storefront. It was a small shul, and we didn't own anything. And we had a lease on a storefront. And there was a row of stores. And there was a big supermarket on the corner. and the supermarket wanted to buy out all the stores and knock them down in order to make sufficient parking for their business. So they came and they bought out all the stores. And we were the last thing left, and we didn't even own the store. We only had a lease. And they came to us, they were going to buy us out. And we then were going to buy the lot across the street and try and build a shul, all of which, Baruch Hashem, happened. So we were, I don't know why they took me along. There were a few very astute businessmen in the shul, and they were going to negotiate with the supermarket the value of the lease. So they appraised the value of the lease at $30,000. We're driving to the lawyer's office for the conference. So as is the want of people, they began to negotiate amongst themselves. So they said, why should we pay only 30,000? Why should we ask? Let's ask 40. The other guy said, let's ask 50. You know, I'm sitting like a fly on the wall. I don't know, it's not my field, real estate in Miami Beach. We come to the lawyer's office, very, very brusque, not a very pleasant person. And he says, I don't have time for you. We have a lot to do here. You have only a lease. What do you want for it? So one of our committee blurted out $75,000. The lawyer said, done. I thought they would collapse. They just didn't know what to do. That we rode back in the car, it was Tisha B'Av.
Why did we ask for 200?
That's exactly the point, right? He's only give us whatever we ask for because he wants to get rid of us. And we only took 75. So in my naivete, I attempted to comfort them. I said, we were willing to take 30. And we got more than 20. They said, Rabbi, what do you know about business? Right? So we left it at that. But that's because they don't know bekarkos. When it comes to real estate, there's no din of honor. They wanted that piece. They needed that piece. They don't care. There was a case here in Israel outside of the Habashbir store on King George. So when they wanted to build a mashbir, so they bought out everybody. There was one little shoemaker who had a booth, and he refused to sell. He wanted Tashra Kalofim, tremendous amounts of money. So they built the whole thing around him. They didn't give in to him. They didn't buy. And eventually, he had to sell it for a pittance of what they originally offered. So when it comes to karka, when it comes to real estate, so the Gemara says, Eino noah bekarkos, because it's the only piece located on this spot on this planet. And therefore, what its value is indeterminable. So Noah only exists on metaltalin, on items that are portable, so to speak, on goods. Now, most businesses don't operate on a 1/6 profit. Very rarely do you make that kind of money. The food stores, for instance, operate on 1.5% to 2% of volume. Other stores on 5%, on 6%. Very rarely do you get that shy level. No. But when I began, I discussed with you a piece of art. So that is the question, is there onoa on that or not? Because again, you can say this is the only Rembrandt, this kind that he painted. So is that the din like karka? That whatever somebody gives you, or if I bought it for 10 million, so I can sell it for 12 million, but I can't sell it for 100 million. And all of this is discussed in halacha in terms of onoas momon, taking advantage of others monetarily. What time is it?
34, 34.
Not a minute.
Oh, can't do. So we'll continue tomorrow, but there's something that's called onoas dvorim, taking advantage, abusive of others through language. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. That has to do with advertising. It has to do with all sorts of other questions which exist today. But that's the concept of onoa, which is mentioned in this week's parsha. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer, Rotza HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'chakos Yisrael, v'ficha chirba lahem Torah mitzvot shenemer, Adonai chavetz aman tzidko yagil Torah.